Hello, everyone, and welcome to HVS Executive Search's continued C-Suite interview series. My name is Matt Black, Senior Vice President at HVS Executive Search. And we are incredibly fortunate to have Joy Rothschild here with us today. Joy is the Chief Human Resources Officer at Omni Hotels and Resorts. So a very warm welcome to you, Joy, and thanks so much for taking the time. Why don't we jump right in?
Okay.
So would love to begin with your career journey. The hospitality industry is so interwoven with our lives, and with that, most everyone has their own unique story as to how they ended up in the industry. I'd love to learn more about what personal or professional influences led you to hospitality.
Okay. So I went to the University of New Hampshire to be a park ranger. I was in recreation. My family had a camp in Maine, a boys' summer camp that's still in existence. And my dad ran cross-country tours. So I was a camper. I camped out, slept in tents, loved to travel. And then when I got to UNH, I realized in my sophomore year there was this hospitality track that was in the business school. And as I started to look into it, I transferred into it and I just fell in love with it. And so I got my degree. It was a business administration degree in hospitality major. And when I graduated, I had this dream to work at the St. Francis in San Francisco because I'd been there as a child and I loved San Francisco. And I got an offer to be a management trainee there. And it was my dream job. But I had signed up for one more interview, and it was a very famous restaurant in New Orleans, which I will not name.
Okay.
And they were coming to our school to hire the first female maitre d' for this restaurant. And they came to school in a Rolls Royce. I'd never seen that before. And they were looking for that one woman. And they made me the offer. And I was so flattered. I said, I'm taking this job. And my professors were like, you don't even like food and beverage. Like, you wanted the St. Francis. You have this other offer from Dunphy Hotels. And I said, no, I'm doing this. And one night, a rat ran into the room. It was a Saturday night. It ran into the room and it died in the middle of the room. And one of the busboys was beside me. And the real maitre d' said, go pick up the rat. And you know what? This is not what I thought it was. So the next day, I went to a payphone. I called Weston. I'm like, could I still have that job? And they said no. And I didn't know anything about business protocol. And then I called Dunphy, and they had offered me a job in Chicago at the Ambassador East. And I said, is that job still open? And they said, no, but we have a management trainee job in New York City. They had the Statler at the time, which was the Hotel Pennsylvania, which got imploded maybe 2 or 3 years ago.
Right.
So anyway, I take a plane to New York. I am walking through the lobby of this 2,000-room hotel across from Madison Square Garden. It's a Star Trek convention and the Westminster Kennel Club show. I'm walking through the lobby.
What an intro.
It was crazy. And I remember thinking, please do not have a reservation for me. Like I can't have made 2 mistakes within a month of graduating from college. But sure enough, they did. So I'm doing the management training program, and I was not the best front guest facing person. I was kind of argumentative. I just was, it wasn't the best place for me. But then I got into what was called personnel. And I loved the employees. And we had 1,800 employees. It was a union hotel. And that was about 7 months into a 1-year training program. And again, I don't know any business protocol. I called the CHRO of Dunphy and said, "This is Joy Lesser. I'm in personnel and I'm not finishing my program. I'm staying here." So she said, "I'm going to fly down and talk to you about like business protocol and chain of command and all this stuff." And she did. And the hotel general manager and the director of personnel at the time, they're like, "She really belongs here and not in the front."
Okay.
And that's how I started into HR. And you know, I tell college graduates, I had to sit in the union meetings and take notes, which I was offended by. I'm like, I'm not a secretary, but that's how I learned labor. And then I had to file benefit forms, and I learned what all the different plans were. Like, I learned so much at that giant hotel. And I was there for 3 years, and I had, you know, a succession of promotions. And then they said, "We think you're ready to be a director." And they sent me to a 100-room hotel in Maine. And it was like, I don't know if you ever saw the show Green Acres, but it was like taking me out of Manhattan, and now I'm in Maine.
Right.
And I did that for 2 years, and I had to do everything. I was a one-person office. And then the HR director job at the Parker House came open, and I applied for it. And this woman who was the CHRO, she said, "You can go on the interview for practice, but you are not getting this job. You're too green." And I went on the interview, and the general manager said to me, it was Philip Jorgis, and he said, "You're not qualified for this job, but I like your energy and I like your enthusiasm, and I'm willing to take a chance on you." And that began a theme that has kind of taken me through my career.
Right.
So I did the job at the Parker House. I loved it, loved it, loved it. And I became an area HR director. And then they brought me one summer up to the corporate office. And at the time, Simon Cooper, who went on to become president of Ritz-Carlton, he recently passed away. He was one of my first mentors. He was the COO, and the CHRO that I had been working for left. And one night I was going home, and he called me into the office and he said, "I have an org chart and there's an empty box for the leader of HR. How would you like your name in it?" So I worked for him until he left, and I was loving my job. And then in 1995, we were owned by a British holding company, Wharf Holdings. They were selling us.
Right.
And every big brand was looking at us, and this little oil and gas company in Corpus Christi, Texas was looking at us. So we were all voting for the Corpus Christi, Texas company to buy us.
Right.
And sure enough, they did. It was Bob Rolling. And the day he bought the company, he fired every single executive, including me.
Wow.
And I had worked for Omni for 18 years. I was considered a stellar employee. And I went home that night, and a GM called me, and he said, "You'll fall in love with a company again, but you'll never marry a company again." And I didn't really know what that meant. But I was in my mid-30s, and I was single, and I worked all the time. And I got a job relatively quickly. I went to Carnival. I led HR there. I moved to Miami. I met my husband. I got married. And I started putting up kind of fences around what I would and wouldn't do. Like, do I really need to go on this trip? Do I really need to go to this dinner? I was just more protective of my time.
Sure.
And I got pregnant, and I was 7 months pregnant with my son. And I got the call that if you've ever been terminated, you dream of, which was, "We made a mistake. Would you ever talk to us again?"
Wow.
And at this point, Bob had owned the company for 2 years.
Okay.
And I flew to Dallas. I was 7 months pregnant. I was living in Miami. My husband's a physician. He had a practice in New Orleans, so we were commuting. And I came back, and I always loved Omni, and Bob offered me the job, and that was in 1998, and I've been here ever since.
Wow.
And it's been, so I'm in my 45th year with Omni. And I never
Unbelievable.
thought I'd be working this long, still having fun, still energetic. But that's kind of my funny path to where I.
You've mentioned the long winding road that led you to the C-suite. Aside from, being let go at that one point, are you able to share any noteworthy barriers, maybe as a woman or just generally within business, that you had to overcome to get to that C-suite level?
Yeah. So I, some of the barriers are in me.
Okay.
Or I learned they were in me, and some of them are not in me. But I will tell you a story that happened right when I came back in 1998, and it was my first board meeting. And I had read this book, Gung Ho by Ken Blanchard. And it was a management book. It was really short. And I thought it was profound in its simplicity and its message, but it was kind of corny. So I said to Mike Diedemeyer, who was my boss, I said, this is my first board meeting, and I just read this book, Gung Ho, and I want to recommend it to everyone and kind of talk about the concepts in it. And he said, what's it about? And I said, well, it's about this guy on his deathbed who had a successful business, and they ask him, what was your key to success? And he names 3 animals. He said, the squirrel, the spirit of the squirrel. He said, squirrels are collecting nuts because if they don't collect the nuts, they're going to starve in the winter. So the message there was every task has a bigger meaning and it's worthwhile work.
Right.
And then the beaver. When beavers make dams, there's no head beaver. If people know the end goal, they all work toward the task. And then the last one was geese. When they're flying in formation, they're squawking and cheering each other on. So you have to cheer people on.
Right.
So Mike says to me, that is the stupidest thing I have ever heard in my life. He said, if you bring that up, you are going to look like a complete idiot. I said, all right, I won't bring it up. So I go to my first board meeting, and Bob Rowling, the owner of the company, is 10 minutes late. He comes in, he said, I'm really sorry I was late. He said, I just had lunch with Ken Blanchard. He said, has anybody read his book, Gung Ho? It's the best business book I've read in ages.
Oh my gosh.
And I glared at Mike. And after that meeting, I went up to him, I said, no one is ever going to tell me again what I will and won't say in a meeting. And that has stuck with me my whole career. So that was
Amazing.
something like asking for permission to give an opinion. I won't do that.
Amazing. Well, and it's worked out for you.
Yes. And when I came back to Omni, Bob, because of the person he is, he made me rethink my role and how HR impacts the business.
Right.
And, if I said we need this benefit program, in my old previous employers, it was like, oh, Joy, that's a great idea. Let's do it. Now it's, what does it cost? What's the return? Is retention going to improve? Who am I losing because I don't have that? What does the hospitality landscape look like?
Right.
He just forced me to be more business oriented in a way that other executives that weren't in HR were.
Right.
And so that to me was a barrier for the function. And I feel because of Bob and the model of our company, I feel like I got to the HR business partner quicker than maybe the industry did. And then I think the other thing, and I think this is women in general, but I see it in men too. Like, people don't want to be unpopular or say the unpopular thing.
Right.
And I kind of feel like it's my role. And I always frame it this way. what is the best idea for Omni? So
Right.
that may be good for your department, but is that the best idea for Omni? And I find that it allows me to take an unpopular position or take
Yeah.
something in a different direction or disagree with someone that's, got a giant ego and is filling up the room. Like, it tends to take it out of what you or I think is best, but what's the best thing for the company?
Right. Right. Awesome. Okay. And so that's the perfect leeway to kind of move and talk a little bit about Omni and its one of a kind business, its growth over the years that's been very much fueled by your focus around culture, people, leadership. So when you rejoined Omni at that executive level, you mentioned your initial mandate was to rebuild the culture of the organization. Can you tell us a bit about what that approach looked like in building this earlier iteration of the Omni culture? Any key opportunities, objectives that you recall, and what was the outcome?
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting. When I came, when I got the call to come back to the company, um, when I met with Bob, he said, "I don't have a culture, and I want to have a culture." And I said, "Every company has a culture." And I said, "I have a lot of friends that still work here, and the culture seems to be focused on making money."
Okay.
And the Omni culture, before Bob purchased it, was you have to balance the needs of the owner, the guest, and the associate.
Mm-hmm.
And when those things are in balance, that's when you have a successful company. And so, Matt, honestly, one of the first things I did when I came back, like, they had just thrown in the closet all the empowerment training and internal development programs and skill certification for frontline associates. Like, a lot of the stuff, I just took the dust off. I'm like, we got to put this stuff back in.
Right. Right.
But I think that there were enough people around from before that wanted to see us get back into balance. But I think that two things really happened that cemented the culture. And Bob, he's a wonderful, wonderful guy. And he really cares about people. And he really takes a long-term view of the business because we're an owner operator, which is so unique.
Right.
But when September 11th happened and the whole travel world shut down, Mike Diedemeyer and I, he was the president at the time. We came up with a bunch of contingencies. Take fresh flowers out of the lobby, take the fruit out of the gym. We don't need a doorman. We don't need a concierge. We had a laundry list a mile long that would have saved millions of dollars.
Right.
And we went to Bob and said, we think we can do this. And he said, "I don't want to touch a service." He said, "This is going to end. People are going to travel again. I don't
Mm-hmm.
want to be digging myself out of a hole. Don't you touch a thing." And that to me was incredible because it showed that we were really, really committed to our service mission.
Right.
The same thing happened in 2008 when there was a recession and travel got soft. And we did some contingency measures and created some efficiencies, but not in the service experience.
Right.
And so that really said to everybody, wow, they really mean it. Now, get to COVID, that was a whole different ballgame.
Yeah.
And we swung the pendulum way back to the owner.
Okay.
And we went from 24,000 employees down to 1,800. And the majority of our hotels were closed. We had a few open that had military or medical personnel in them.
Right.
And our mantra, it was lose less. Will you lose less closing or lose less staying open? Will you lose less with a restaurant or without a restaurant? So we really challenged everybody to think about losing less. But we got a lot of flack because everybody said, what happened to the balance of the trilogy?
Right.
And so we survived very well through COVID because we did that.
Right.
But we spent the past few years rebuilding to get back to the balance.
Right. Right. Okay. And so looking to today and looking at that balance that you're referring to, like how would you define the Omni culture of today?
So funny you ask. We used COVID to look at like what are the pillars of our culture and how do we need to speak to a new generation of Omni employees? Because when we during COVID, people left the hospitality industry and never came back. So now we're back up to 21,000 employees, but they're not all hospitality people that knew our business. So we created this new internal branding under the umbrella of All In.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's got 4 core values. One is the power of all, which is we're all here to create memorable experiences. 2 is all together. We are going to live the trilogy, customer, owner, employee. 3, we have a heart for all. And that means we're good community partners and we're going to participate in building up our communities, either through charitable works or hiring people or whatever. And then the last one is really driving our belief that it's our responsibilities to grow leaders from within. We call it growing the garden.
Yeah.
So we've spent a lot of time and energy instilling those 4 core values, teaching them, reinforcing them. We took old training programs that we had. One was called the Power of Engagement, and it was how to engage with customers and service recovery and what makes us different. And we took the Power of Engagement and made it an 8-module class, and we put every single front of the house employee through it. So we've really made major investments in bringing back our service culture. And 2 years ago, the company rallying cry was elevate the experience. And we lifted our medallia scores in TripAdvisor, and we got back to the top of JD Power. And all of this was these efforts of power of engagement and our internal branding and reinforcing the culture. Last year, it was elevate revenue.
Yeah.
And we did it. We focused the whole organization on revenue generating activities, educating leaders about driving revenue.
Right.
And this year it's achieved new heights. Like we're making great progress in service and in revenue. How do we get even more, get even higher? But it took the whole company focused on those initiatives.
Amazing. Amazing. And I'm glad you mentioned engagement because I know you're passionate about and an incredible ambassador for employee experience and engagement. Yes. But I'm curious, how do you empower your executive, regional, and property leadership to foster real, impactful employee engagement themselves?
So that's a great question. There's some soft answers and some hard answers. So the soft answers are Bob Rowling, who's now retired, his son Blake Rowling, who runs the company, Kurt Alexander, the executive team. We model it. And so on a recent example, and I just loved it, our hotel in Asheville was decimated. We have 800 employees working there. It was closed. Yeah. And when it was closed, we have an employee charitable foundation called the Omni Circle where people can apply for grants if they've hit upon hard times. We had every Omni hotel doing Omni Circle drives and bake sales and closet sales and raising money to give to Asheville. And then we had about 50 employees that were working the whole time. The engineers, the cleaning crews, they were getting the property ready to reopen.
Right.
And about, I don't remember when the government lifted the ban. You couldn't fly in there for like a month. But as soon as they lifted the ban, Kurt Alexander, myself, all the senior executives, we got on a plane. We had our local hotels cook lunch. It was Texas barbecue, and we had all these specialty desserts. We got on a plane. We flew to Asheville. We served 50 people lunch. We gave them love. We gave them T-shirts that said Omni Asheville Strong. Like, we personally modeled that.
Right.
And it just sends a message to everyone. Like, this is what Omni does. We put our arms around each other. We care for each other. We get in front of a problem. We show up for you.
Right.
The hard metrics is it's part of your bonus to get a good engagement score. And so we do engagement surveys a few times a year, and your compensation is tied to it, and you can't fake it. Like a hotel that's maybe not doing a great job, and then the week before the survey, they serve steak in the cafeteria for a week. The employees see through that. It doesn't work.
Right.
And so we make a very big deal out of our recognition programs and using social media to share them, and making a big deal out of promoting people and celebrating people and, giving people career boosts.
Right.
And I think that all of that is a formula, but you have to see the top leaders in the company doing it.
Right. And so Omni also has a tremendous reputation for strong retention and development of your leaders, as you just mentioned. How do you consistently retain these top performers and create opportunities for their growth, though, in such a competitive, opportunistic industry, especially today?
We have a lot of people in Omni in high-level positions that have a very unique story. And I'll just call out two, but I think that those stories inspire people to stay. So Lexi Coley, she's sitting in the office next to me. Lexi was like a AFOM in San Diego. She worked her way up. She did all our development programs. She worked her way up to a GM. And she was the general manager at the Dallas Park West. And she probably worked at, I don't know, 6 or 7 of our hotels. Well, during COVID, we sold that hotel. And we said, Lexi, we can send you on task force until something opens in Dallas. It just so happens her husband works for us too, so she didn't want to leave Dallas. And Kurt and I said, here's a crazy idea. You're a product of Omni training programs. How would you like to lead training and development for Omni? She's like, I've never worked in HR in my life. I'm like, I know. We'll make it up as we go along. But you've done all these programs. You know what works, what doesn't work. She's been doing it now since 2020. She's a complete rock star. She's launched so many great programs. And then we have other stories like our president, Kurt Alexander, and this is a crazy story. 9 or 10 years ago, Bob Rowling came to me and Mike Diedemeyer and said, I met this young investment banker. He's got no hospitality experience, but I think he could run Omni one day.
Wow.
So he said, I want you and Mike to meet him.
Big
so
statement.
We met him. Crazy. So we met him. He's so nice, so humble. And Mike's like, we can put something together for you, but you got to really like be flexible with us. He said, okay. So Mike said, have you ever worked in a hotel? And he said, no. And Mike said to him, I don't want to see you for 1 year. He said, Joy is going to put a training program together and you are going to go to a hotel and you are going to work every single job. You're going to make beds. You're going to do laundry. You're going to cook.
Right.
And he did it. He did it. And he came back a year later and we threw him special projects and everything he did, he added value to, and he was smart. And we made him CFO. And he was CFO for 8 years. And then a year and a half ago, we're like, you're ready to be president.
So speaking of that, that young investment banker who's doing a tremendous job now in the president role, looking ahead for Omni, I know you all have some exciting growth plans on the horizon. Can you tell us a bit about what that looks like for you? And I'm curious, how will that require you to adapt your leadership and people strategy to most effectively support that growth?
Yeah, so we always like to say we're very opportunistic. And so we have never had like Omni's going to double in size in the next 5 years. We have no plans. Right. Now, in 2013, we bought a KSL portfolio. We doubled in revenue and we doubled in employees. Right. So we've done big moves, but right now on the horizon, we have Fort Lauderdale's opening this year. We're building a luxury resort in Pontoque, Mexico that will open the following year. We're building in Raleigh. We've got a hotel soon to be announced, a major convention hotel. And so we're continuing to expand. I think what that means for Omni is two things. First is just the bench strength to keep feeding these properties, because it's really hard to bring in GMs from the outside. Yeah. They get it. We have some, but most of our GMs are grown from within. Right. And that works for us. That's great. Like Fort Lauderdale right now, we have our GM Gala guy. She just ran Frisco Star. My HR director from Nashville's going. The finance director from Viking Lakes is going. The engineer from Orlando's going. So half the EC right now is Omni. So we know Omni will get in there. The Omni culture will live there. Yeah. But one is just developing bench strength. And then two is developing, Kurt is in his 40s. Blake is in his 40s. Right. I'm in my 60s. Right. Like, it's my job, and it's every executive's job to identify their successor and groom them. So now I'd love to shift gears and get your perspective on the past, present, and future of HR and leadership capabilities that are needed to drive meaningful value within hospitality. So first off, the chief HR officer or the chief people officer position has changed quite a bit over the years, unlike other C-suite roles. I'd love your perspective on the evolution of the CHRO position, its shift in perceived value, responsibilities, its impact, and today's importance of really having an executive strategic HR partner in the C-suite. Yeah, I mean, I think, when I started many moons ago, HR was really an administrative function. Right. I think then it kind of turned into the police or the principal's office. Yeah. And then I think, COVID changed HR because you had to like build the plane while you were flying it. And a lot of people aren't comfortable in that space. Like, I think HR has had to ask more thought-provoking questions and not be in the room saying, I have my list of reviews that are late and you didn't do this form and I'm writing a warning notice. Like you've had to lead the organization through more thoughtful discussions. And I think it takes, I think you have to have the relationships with your peers and your bosses. And I think you have to have the credibility in the organization.
So, when considering the most effective, impactful executives within the hospitality space, the necessary capabilities of these individuals have changed over the years. What key capabilities and characteristics of successful executives do you view as out from the past and in for the present?
I think the number one word that comes to my mind is adaptability.
Mm-hmm.
I think people that are stuck in, we've always done it this way, and this is the way the hospitality industry does it. I think that's out, and I think adaptability is in. And like bending with the road, where's the road going?
Sure.
I think that's a biggie. I think having a point of view that you're not afraid to express. I think kind of having a broader view of the business than what your title is,
Mm-hmm.
and having opinions on it is really important.
Yeah, yeah. And same goes, to the question for any executive leadership role. It's not just about having that viewpoint and speaking it into action. It's coming with the right knowledge and capabilities across the business and really knowing all sides of the business, right? A little bit different from years back.
Yes.
And so finally, let's look forward. So considering the changing forces in hospitality, whether that's tech related or changing customer journey or growing competition and guest expectations, what executive leadership capabilities do you see as maybe not essential today, but might be quite essential in the future?
Yeah, I think technology is a big bucket, but I think that, the CIO in our building and maybe the CFO to some extent, but like they're really the technology depository of like information. Sure. And I think that we all have to be more educated, mindful of what technology can do or can't do. And this is a small example, but
yeah.
So we're changing our human resource information system. And right now I have a Chevy and I bought a Cadillac. Okay. And the worst thing I can do is take the Chevy processes and put it in the Cadillac. Otherwise, I don't need the Cadillac.
Right.
And so we have this committee, and the CIO's on it, the CFO, me, and some project people. And we meet every week, and what we talk about is, are we recreating a horrible process, and are we fully using the technology available to us? And so I think I don't love learning about technology, but I'm forcing myself to because it's the best thing for Omni. But I think just having a grasp on the power of technology is something. By the same token, I don't think Omni will ever have kiosks to check in on. I don't think we'll ever have robots delivering towels to the rooms. Mm-hmm. I think we're always going to want to provide a personal experience.
So believe it or not, that's all I have. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for taking the time, sharing your career journey, insights, so many great things to think about here. So thank you very much, Joy.